We're going to get underway. I'm Bill Kimball. I'm the president of the Electric City Culture Council, and I'm pleased to welcome you here to Evans Contemporary. And I just want to take this moment to acknowledge that the lands on which we gather are the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Mississauga, adjacent to Haudenosaunee territory in the area covered by the Williams Treaty. And here we are taking advantage of that great place and talking about it today. Talking about what we've done with it, what we're going to do with it. And to get us going, I'm going to turn it over to Sue Ditta, who is the Executive Director of the Electric City Culture Council. Thank you, Sue. Tell us what's going on.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Now, just before I get going with the wrap about the panel, I'd like to ask Paolo Fortin to step up to the mic. We want to extend a huge thanks to Evans Contemporary for hosting us here tonight. It's such a perfect space for this event. Paolo, where are you? Tell us about the show.
Yeah, I just have a few things to say. It's mainly logistics. There is a washroom at the back. It's a use at your own risk kind of washroom. There is a lock on the door, so just make sure you use it, and you have to pull really hard. Also, I believe this is an illegal room we have, so that's the exit. If anything catches on fire, there's no other exits, so just go ahead there. So also we have a First Friday Art Crawl happening tomorrow. I just want to say a few things about that. We have a show here of Eric Loader's work. Not this work, this is a one-night thing that we have up just for tonight. But upstairs at Acme, which Joe Stable runs, Sarah Jabot is showing. Also at Star X, which I manage, Connie Van Bren will be showing there. And we'll have Eric show of kitchen still life work that he's produced. So the show will change. There's also at the Sapphire Lounge, or Sapphire Room, Max's Cabaret will be happening tomorrow night. And Men's Social at Catalina's. So there's a lot going on, like right in this block. So it's amazing. I also want to thank Joe Stable for the paintings we're looking at right now is Eric Loader's work, late 70s, Joe. The three large pieces in this kind of shaped piece over here are from Joe's collection, and just smaller work. This one, the little tiny one is Joe's as well. And the rest are from my collection. We decided to do this one-night event in conjunction with what we're doing tonight, so people can see the work. Tomorrow the show is going to change, so you should come back and have a good time. Washroom, door, exit.
You got it. Thanks, Paolo. Thank you all for coming to A Space for Us, Reimagining the Downtown. This event was organized as a cultural incubator, one of our regular series of events pursuing critical issues and ideas in the arts. EC3, in case there's someone here who doesn't know what EC3 is the Municipal Arts Council. We're the service organization that supports arts, culture, and heritage organizations, as well as the work of individual artists in Peterborough and the surrounding region. I want to say thanks to all of you for coming. I want to acknowledge that we are being tape recorded tonight, video recorded tonight, and that we're being recorded for Trent Radio for a broadcast later on, and for a podcast by PIP, Peterborough Independent Podcasters. They'll be producing a podcast, so we'll have access to the proceedings for a long time afterwards. I'm smiling and I show them there. And I want to thank all the people who've done the tech tonight. All of you are here because you have an interest in arts, culture, and heritage, and we know that. But you're also here as voters, as taxpayers, and as citizens. And I wanted to make a point of that because the idea for this event was spurred on by what's been happening in the city around the issue of heritage designation of some really crucial buildings downtown, the purchase and sale of some very important buildings, and it seemed to us to be a critical time to talk about this issue in public and also to bring the arts, culture, and heritage communities together. So EC3 had done a couple of things. We'd organized a letter writing campaign around the pig's ear and the Black Horse Heritage Designation issue. We made a presentation at council. We wrote an open letter. And this cultural incubator is the follow-up to those actions. I want to thank and acknowledge Annie Yeager, who was our artist advisor on this event. And we felt very strongly that the community needed to come together and make a first step in having our voices heard on this matter, and also to bring some outside expertise to bear. We know that the arts, culture, and heritage sector in this city is innovative, it's creative, it isn't afraid of change, it embraces risk, and we feel really strongly that with information, resources, gaining skills and knowledge from other people, that we can put forward plans and actions that mean that gentrification and densification are not a disaster for the arts, culture, and heritage community. That's what this night is about. How can we manage this issue? How can we accept the targets that we have through a place to grow, the Ontario densification legislation, still preserve our heritage downtown, and still make sure that artists and all kinds of cultural workers have places to live that are affordable and have places to present their work. That's the heart and soul of this town. And we want to work together, build new partnerships, and make sure that that happens. This is happening everywhere in the world. We know it's happening in Toronto. We know it's happening in New York. I saw pictures of huge sit-ins in Milan last week, where over 300 heritage buildings that are thousands of years old are being destroyed to build condominiums. I don't think we have to do nothing. I think we can do things. And I know that Jeremy and Catherine and Laurel are going to give us some ideas on what we can do. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the panel over to Michael Gallant. Michael is on the EC3 board. He's on the DBIA board. He is a design principal with Let Architects, managing a number of projects, including a really big one in Barrie. And we're thrilled to have him with us tonight. For me, because I'm old. He's part of a younger generation of architects who also have a lot of planning and sustainability training and experience. So we're really thrilled to have him moderate the panel tonight. He's a terrific asset to EC3 and all our work. People, welcome Michael Gallant.
Thanks, Sue. And thanks, Sue, for pulling together this great panel. Laurel, who is our local cohort, Catherine Nasmith, and Jeremy Freeberger. So everyone please have a seat. I've got a kind of before we begin, I've got a bit of a local context spiel that I'll run through, and then the way tonight will work is I'll do a quick bio introduction to each of the panelists, and then we'll let the panelists speak. Everyone has a different kind of perspective on this issue, and so we'll give them 15 minutes or so each to speak individually to the topic, and then we'll have a few follow-up questions, and then we'll open the floor if there's any questions from anybody who's here tonight. So before we jump in, a bit of some local context for our panelists. So Peterborough is unique. It's got kind of this Goldilocks complex where we're close enough to Toronto where we don't have to deal with some of the densification issues that have been happening, but we're far enough away that we get to watch from a distance. And so it's not too hot, not too cold. We're kind of been living in this Goldilocks situation. And so what that's meant for us is that we've been able to remain fairly independent as a center. And so we've been free from a lot of the development pressures in the GTA. And it's enabled us to successfully protect a great deal of the heritage and history in our city as compared to many other municipalities in Ontario. Peterborough has over 400 independent businesses in the downtown core, which is a really strong statistic when you compare that to other municipalities of equal size. And our city also supports a very rich arts and culture scene, as evident tonight, and also which includes many successful studios, galleries, and theaters. So as Sue had mentioned, the province has recently updated the growth plan, which includes Peterborough. Peterborough is part of the Golden Horseshoe in the provincial legislation. And so intensification targets for Peterborough include 150 residents and jobs per hectare, which seems like a kind of a weird number, but when you break it down, it's about 700 people or one person per 700 square feet, and then obviously that depends on how dense the development is. But ultimately, what that means is fairly dense development. And the bulk of our downtown is fairly historic, as you might have noticed. So, you know, the growth target is there for a reason. I think it's still smart growth. And so how do we manage that in a strategic way, given the setting that we're in? That should be an interesting topic as part of our discussion. And we've learned from other municipalities, the potential for growth comes with great potential, but it also comes with great risk. So we've seen a lot of that risk in other municipalities, as Sue had mentioned at the intro. On one hand, this development brings the opportunity for urban renewal, increased tax revenue from a city perspective, better access to public amenities, and obviously growth. But on the other hand, and if it's not managed correctly, it has potential to unsustainably increase property values, which is always in the news in the GTA, lead to over-gentrification, which poses concerns with low income housing availability, increased cost of living, loss of independent businesses, and the risk of loss to heritage and cultural assets. So before all of this sounds very doom and gloom, there is some good news. So Peterborough, given the Goldilocks complex, has the opportunity for some time and some retrospect to get things right and to learn from example. And the timing is key. Peterborough is about to go through a thorough process in updating the city's official plan. This is the first time that we've updated it since 1981. So this is a key moment in time to have these discussions. It's great to get public input and reaction to what is important in our city and how we want to see the city grow into the future. The city has responded to this. So they've hired and dedicated 2 new staff who are going to work through the drafting of the official plan. They've committed to 6 public consultation sessions over the next year, online surveys, and a new website for feedback, as well as an official plan steering committee that will include 20 individuals from diverse backgrounds who will sit in a steering committee to oversee the draft of that document. So the draft or the current schedule has the official plan to be completed by September 2018. So all the more timely for this discussion. So now I'd like to introduce Jeremy. So Jeremy is a chief connector and cultural strategist with Cobalt Connects in Hamilton, Ontario. Jeremy is a leader in Hamilton's creative community has been for over the last 15 years. His experience ranges from producing award-winning theater and ballet with the RBC Festival of Classics and Canadian Ballet Youth Ensemble to developing more than 150 square feet of studio facilities. Sorry?
150,000. Very impressive.
150,000.
That's dancers per square inch.
150,000 square feet of studio facilities. He also writing policy and plans for municipalities around creative sector development. Jeremy focuses primarily on regional and municipal partnership development and organizational development. Jeremy is the founder of Cobalt Connects. Jeremy has spoken at dozens of conferences on the subject of creative community economic development and has held positions on boards and committees including our Cultural Community Committee, chair of the City of Hamilton's Cultural Plan, Super Crawl, Canvas, and the Bay Area Restoration Council. Currently, Jeremy is leading a team through the acquisition and restoration of Westdale Theatre, directing the VO talent for a new video game, and is the concept lead for a 130-foot-long mural derived from Canada's most robust sea catalog at the Royal Botanical Gardens. Yeah, so he's a busy guy. Jeremy?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. It's always nice to come back to Peterborough. I spent a lot of time as a child coming up here. My father grew up in Bancroft in Peterborough, so this is where I learned to pick up a lacrosse stick, and it's where I had my butt handed to me by your community a number of times in the lacrosse arena, but also getting ginger snaps from my grandma in her home and whatnot, so it's great to come back to a place where I've got a bit of a tangible connection. As you heard from the bio, my background is from an art perspective. I went to school, McMaster at NYU for theater and music, and spent my early years on film sets, doing Canadian television and film for a long time. And so my heart and my practice comes from an art practice, but where it's being executed now is in a very different place. Shifting back towards art as I get older. So I'm going to walk you quickly through sort of like the progression of our organization and what we do. We're a very different animal. We're designated an art service organization, and most art service organizations in the province, outside of those that are local, are discipline specific. So they're focused on film or Aboriginal art or whatever they might well be. We're one of the few.
You ever wondered if you can stand up?
I can do that.
I don't want to lose your life.
I can lift my mic while I stand.
It's only 15 minutes.
Oh, it's fine.
Thank you, sir.
If I didn't have to use a mic, I would. But I assume the podcast people want the mic. They're nodding. Beautiful. There you are. So we're an ASO, but we're not a discipline-specific ASO. When the province designated that to us, they said, go do things all over the place. So and because I'm maybe compulsive or maybe manic or whatever, our mission statement is to do innovative projects, research, and facilities that advance the creative sector. Really broad, so that I'm not hemmed in by anything. So we've produced feature films and television shows, we're producing a video game, we make public art, we do a whole pile of weird stuff in an effort to be responsive. We find a lot of arts organizations get hemmed in by a very tight mandate. We will be the symphony forever, we will be the theater forever, which means they can't always be responsive to what's going on in the community. So things in our community in Hamilton at the time, this is in the early 2000s, were going through rapid change, and there weren't any organizations that were just ready to do whatever, as opposed to do what they thought was the best thing, and therefore their mandate. So we kept this really broad, weird mandate. And it started with this gaggle of people, and I like using this photo because this goes back 17 years now. I was working for the Arts Council in our community, and my job was to take a line off their strat plan that said, build a co-location space for artists. Figure out what that means. So interviewed hundreds of artists and went through. Hamilton at the time had a mountain of vacant property in the downtown core. Met with the Minister of Culture, Sheila Copps, and figured out how funding could work, and came back to the organization after a year of research and said, here's the list, here are the buildings, here's what the artists want, here's what they can afford to pay, here's some money, let's go do this. And they said, no. So I took the book and left, and I quit. Literally that day I quit, and I said, if you're not doing this, I'm moving on. And this gang of people stuck with me. A handful of artists, all of us in our early 20s. We hadn't rented anything more than an apartment in our life. We had zero capital, no organization, no structure. And within 6 months, we found ourselves a 150,000 square foot cotton mill, where the owners had bought the mill, it was fully functional. President of the baby clothing company in that factory passed away. The company folded. 90,000 square feet of vacant space meant that property owner was desperate for anything that wouldn't mean the bleeding would stop in his building as far as his revenue would go. So on a handshake, the 6 of us started renovating offices into studios, which meant tearing our carpet and painting the walls white. And within 6 months, we had filled about 15,000 square feet with painters and dancers and architects and industrial designers and just creative people of all different types. And founded the organization Imperial Cotton Center for the Arts. We spent the first 10 years of our existence there and moved on once that building owner no longer wanted to keep investing in his property and build more space. He wanted someone else to come in and buy it. Thankfully, it's been bought by Rob Zeidler, and he's doing amazing work with it. That's that building. So it's a massive complex in the fine neighborhood known as Industrial Sector B, where everyone wanted to be. That's what we always told everybody. We had no neighbors except for empty steel factories. But it was the first time that on a street down that side, there's Lansdowne Street, on Saturdays when we had open studio days or exhibitions on the 3rd floor, we had a lineup of a few hundred people wanting to get into what they thought a vacant building in the north end. And that's when economic development came to us and said, you are doing something different. What is this all about? And they hired us to write their first creative industry strategy, where we analyzed what the market sector was for the arts. And it was the first time the city had heard that there were more people employed in the arts than there were in steel. And for a city that's like its brain is steel, like if you're not pulled out of the molten lava that is happening at the steel plants, you're not a Hamiltonian. So to find out there was something else that was maybe more in line with our new identity really shocked them. And over the course of the next few years, we developed more properties. This was originally Tressiter Brother paper boxes. which made the paper boxes that shipped the cotton out of Imperial Cotton Center. Down the street from that was an ink company that printed the boxes. So you start to see like this industrial path of how your landscape and your built form was indicative of the people and the time and whatnot, and we wanted to try and figure out how we were reconnecting that. So every property was renamed what its earliest use was that we could find. They were renovated all by private sector developers who came to us and said, I bought this property in the 80s when I could buy anything for $100 in Hamilton. It's sat empty, what would you do with it? We would very simply assess what's the right sector of the art scene to move in here, what's the building good for, is it a dance building, is it a photography building, is it an anything building, and work with them to develop the space. So they paid for renos, we found tenants, we got paid if we found tenants. So it was this very sort of hand-to-mouth kind of symbiotic relationship, because basically all of the funders at the local and provincial level said, we'll never fund what you do, because what you do is an art. The artists are doing art, but what we were doing was something different. So there was no funding pile that we fit in, but we kept doing it. So another 10,000 square foot building on James Street, which you probably now know about. James Street North is sort of the home of the art sector in Hamilton in a very big way. And we started moving from industrial sector B down to the center of downtown. All of a sudden, we weren't just being put in the buildings that were being thrown away, we were being put in the buildings that were prized. So this is an 1867 hotel that was built across the street from the Armory. So when you came back from service, the first thing you did is went across the street and got hammered at the, what was known as the Bucket of Blood, was the name of the bar, literally. And you could take a woman of the night upstairs for an hourly rental if you needed to. Now it's a coffee shop and a gallery on the ground floor and 19 studios upstairs. We're now located in the Players Hill Theater, which is an 1874 mansion with a 100-seat theater tied to it. Heritage designated building. Our job has been to teach them as an older, they're a 142-year-old theater organization, the oldest in North America, how to care for their property and how to rethink their business model so they can reconnect with that art scene that's booming around them, but not necessarily in their space. And we needed to be in a fully AODA compliant space as a nonprofit, so they brought us that. So we're in that space.
AOD is?
Accessibility of Ontario Disabilities Act, so it's ramps and washrooms and all of those fun things that make heritage property people terrified, but necessary. And just yesterday, we're part of a group that got the keys to this building. So this is the original 1935 facade of the Westdale Theatre. It's currently covered in a bunch of plastic that will come off as soon as I'm allowed to take it off. So it's a 400-seat theater that's being completely revisioned. So it's a syndicated mortgage of foundations and individual investors to buy it for a nonprofit that's now going through the process starting in 3 weeks of raising the money to renovate literally everything inside. So another probably $1.7 million of renovating inside. So we have this path of property development going on one side, and because we're doing well at that, which is driving property tax and investments in we're working with BIAs, we're working with the building department and zoning and all of those internal departments at the city. Cities start calling us and saying, you guys talk artist and developer and planner and whatever, what could you do for us? So we start doing programming, which we'd never done before. So this is a place called the Live Lab at MAC, which is like a theater where you're watching stuff and we're doing an EEG on your brain. I'll tell you more about that later. We start doing programming where we're using the money that we've generated from properties to encourage art productions. So we're funding music videos, we're funding dance productions, we're funding theater productions, things of that sort. We do things like Space Finder, which is this online network of spaces from yoga studios to churches that artists can use for whatever they want. And then we fall into the world of public art, where we sort of started feeling like our building projects were kind of an art piece, that we were restoring both the architecture and the built form, and we wanted to play in public space again. So we managed the City of Burlington's public art program, the Royal Botanical Gardens public art program, where we manage a $1 million fund for buying public art for them. We start doing performance artwork of our own, so I participate in a lot of theater festivals. This was a piece about being in the moment, but it was actually a site-specific performance festival at the 270 Sherman Building, the first building we had done 15 years ago. So it was sort of an interesting moment for me to come back to a place about being now. So it was a tiny light show. We do things like Tale of the Town, which in Hamilton starts tomorrow. Is a neighborhood storytelling project that turns into a podcast and a TV show on TVO, all about the neighborhood. So each year we do 2 different neighborhoods. But we do a lot of public consultation as well. So when a city calls us, they say, help us write our cultural plan, go help us figure out who we are as people. We go out and do all the standard stuff, data and interviewing and all that, but we tend to like going out and doing a lot of stuff where we intervene in the public with tangible art making. So this is, ubiquitous festival, whatever, where there's that zone of booths that are like the local newspaper and the duct cleaner and the cat portrait person and all those, like that place, and that's the section that pays for the artists who are on stage because they've all paid booth fees. So we take booths and we reimagine them and turn them into things that people have to participate in. So this was the thing about how kids interact with civic spaces. So the kids got to paint on this wall while we talked to their parents and got real data, like this stuff, where people tell us where they find things interesting in their neighborhood. This was in Brantford. We were doing a consultation about how they engage and make choices about cultural experiences in their community. So we had 3 different public events. The one on the left, your right, sorry, is in Georgetown, Applefest, I can't recall where it happens, St. George. Huge quilting community, so we took these traditional quilting patterns, and when they chose answers for a question about how much they spend on art or whatever, they got to fill in a tile based, the color was representative of their answer. So they were doing something that they felt aesthetically connected to, but for us it was pure data. On the other side was a comedy festival, so people were kind of half drunk. So we had, and there's a hunting community there and a rural community there, so we had a bunch of goose decoys, and you had to stick it to a goose, depending on what you agreed with. Just different ways of doing it. We've done, and that first report we did for the city was sort of our impetus to start doing research. So every couple of years we do this project over again where we analyze where artists are living, where they're renting space, how much they're paying, what they're doing. And we start to track that data and be able to visualize it for people and get core stats, primarily around things like space. So when you find out that 71% of a sector feels like their space is holding them back, that should be a signal to people in ECDev. If you change that word for education or healthcare, they pay attention. Our job is to try and make them pay attention to this being still a factor for the creative sector. And then expressing vibrancy is this weird offshoot for us, where we're doing stuff in buildings and culture and neighborhood. And the province had this fund to fund cultural plans across the province, and we wrote a bunch of those. And they had a little nugget of funding left at the end, and they called us and said, you should apply, and don't have a client, just apply with what you'd like to think about. I'm like, all right. So looking at all these cultural plans, yeah, it's kind of a neat opportunity. So all these cultural plans have been revamped from sometimes like the 60s, 70s, got revamped, and the old problem was that no one could agree on what culture meant. So you could go to council and you'd argue about it, even though you were saying invest in the theater or whatever, they'd argue about what culture was and we couldn't get anywhere. So we looked at these new plans and said, what's the new word? How are they going to change that? So the new word was vibrant. So instead of coming up with a way to measure culture, they came up with a new word. We want vibrant neighborhoods, vibrant sectors, vibrant people. What the hell is vibrant? Each of you has a new definition, right? So we said, we want to tackle the word vibrant. So we created this 3-step process, taking stock where we go through a neighborhood. So pick your downtown street. We count everything. Broken windows, garbage, cafes, wine bars, empty buildings, heritage buildings, whatever. We count all of the tangible stuff we can count. Signs, trees, brush, whatever. And then we take your residents through that same area and have a very formulaic survey that a bunch of PhD students wrote about how to figure out what they're interacting with and seeing. What's catching their eye? What are the interactions they're seeing in that space? And then the third one, digging deeper, was the thing that we could only do at the live lab. So there's those people watching. Here's the live lab. So you're in this little 100-seat movie theater while you're watching a live performance or seeing a video or listening to an audioscape of a neighborhood. We're doing an EEG on your brain, we're monitoring your heart rate, we're monitoring whether you're sweating, we're monitoring whether your eyes are twitching, all that sort of stuff, so that we get your physiological response. So we can say, what's in the neighborhood? What did you think you felt about it? What's your body feeling? And are those things aligned? Where's there a through line between those things? 2 minutes. Here we go. So we take all that data and we make it look really interesting. We're all going to have this problem, I hope. Yeah, so you can look at, and on the vibrant thing, it's not everyone's definition of vibrant is the same, and it shouldn't be, just like your cultural definition shouldn't be. So you can look at a neighborhood and say, am I 35, am I female, or am I male, whatever, and you get different data, depending on, this is what an EEG looks like. This is what your brain looks like on 8 different neighborhoods in Hamilton. Some of you like, some of you hate. If I had more time, I could explain why they're interesting. But this is the really interesting one. So this is this is the median of everyone's sense of vibrancy as they go through neighborhoods. And where I'm really excited is not in the neighborhoods that just do this or just do this or just plateau. It's what's happening when it goes up or down. What's the thing that's twisting you to say, no, I love this block, I hate this block, I love this block, what's that thing that's changing your mind? So we've written documents about what that is. We did this study with the Ontario BIA Association, looking at all the BIAs in Ontario with a team of consultants. What we realized is that no one's tracking anything. We dealt with so many municipalities, like, tell me how many vacant stores there are on your street, or tell me what the population is in this neighborhood. Nobody knows. So our job was to go and find as much of that and put it in one place as we could, and try and take those stats and make them something that are interesting for people to think about when they're looking at their BIA. What's different from your BIA versus Guelph or Barrie or downtown Toronto? What are the assets that are in neighborhoods that are really driving interesting things? BIA managers saying that natural spaces and cultural facilities are the core magnets for downtown cores. What's the business mix? I'm going to be really quick about this. The reality of Hamilton now, you may have heard like a great story about how we're being really creative and interesting. The reality is, like, literally in this moment, we are in probably the toughest time I've dealt with in Hamilton, and that we are on a rampant property development phase. And these are all realities. My house that I bought 3 years ago is now worth 100% more. That's bonkers. That feels great, but I can't move everywhere in town. The rates, the property value increases within BIAs, which is tends to be where studios and cultural facilities land, going through the roof. We still have a huge child poverty problem that we said 10 years ago we were going to deal with. We haven't touched it. Minimum wage going up in 3 years. It's nowhere near the pace of real estate, so it doesn't really help. There's still a huge shortfall for affordable housing. There is arts funding, but there's only arts funding now because they didn't do any changes for a decade. So even by inflation, we're still not back at zero. So as much as there's really great stuff going on, some of those core value issues about what makes up your community, for me, haven't changed in our community. And we're going through some really rampant development where we get articles like this the other day that came out, where really fantastic people like this guy named Lamb says things like our city's an unpainted canvas and that we're a dying city. And the social media backlash to this project by our city to go to Toronto and have a Hamilton Day in Toronto has been pretty horrible when this is the PR that we get out of it. So it's a warning, and that you're having the conversation at the right time before all this stuff gets inked and put in stone. Really figure out what your values are here as opposed to generic values, and find a way to put those in practice. There are lots of interesting models to do that: land trusts, syndicated mortgages, co-ops, all sorts of things. And I know some of our other folks will talk about designation tools and things of that sort, but we can probably get into that in the open conversation.
Jeremy, I'm really impressed that you were able to catch all of that in 15 minutes. That's unbelievable.
I'm panting.
And you're some truly inspirational work. And so our next panelist, I'll do a quick bio. Catherine Naismith.
Naismith. Not pronounced the way it looks.
Okay. Catherine Naismith, educated at the University of Toronto, also attended Harriet-Watt University in Edinburgh. Catherine is an architect and has offices in Kensington Market in Toronto, and a former general store and post office in Windermere, Ontario. She specializes in heritage research and restoration, custom residences, urban design, and heritage conservation districts. She has won awards from both Heritage Canada and Canada Association of Heritage Professionals. Current projects include Heritage Conservation District Plan for Port Dalhousie, a condominium conversion of the former Harris Mansion at 450 Pape Avenue, as well as steering several clients through the Heritage Property Tax Rebate Program. The first project under that program was 519 to 523 Queen Street West, which city staff have been using as an example for positive benefits of that program. Among her awards are the Jane Jacobs Prize in 2010, 2 Queen Jubilee medals for her work on behalf of Ontario Heritage, several from Heritage Toronto, the OAA, the Muskoka Heritage Foundation. She was the grandmother to Doors Open program in Toronto, and is currently the president of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, as well as the Toronto branch. She is the past chair of the Toronto Preservation Board and the Gardiner Lakeshore Task Force. She is also the publisher of Built Heritage News, a bi-weekly e-journal with 1,500 subscribers across Canada.
And that's the short bio. Sorry, that's way too long. Okay, I've got 15 minutes and a lot to tell you. I've compressed what is like a couple of 40-minute talks in 15 minutes, so I think I can get some ideas across. But you have to, I can't talk as fast as you. No man, nobody. That was so impressive. So, I came up with the idea, the analogy of Main Street as Old Growth Forest several years ago, and I kind of sat on it for a while, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's something in this. So, let me just give you, I'm going to read you the definition. Old growth forests are characterized by a number of structural and ecological features. The most obvious feature is the abundance of huge old trees that tower far above the lower levels of the forest because of the great length of time that it takes. This is where it gets interesting. Because of the great length of time that it takes for these forests to evolve, we often think of them as unchanging environments. On the contrary, the old growth forest is a very dynamic system in which constant changes are taking place. Large and small scale disturbances change the structure and composition of the forest. Renewal and recycling of young and old trees continually revitalizes the forest, and the lives of the inhabitants are continually reshaping and responding to it. All of these processes result in the diverse and highly productive ecosystems we call old growth forests. Now, like that's a Main Street, right? I'll take you through this argument a bit, but the parallel is really important in the notion that Main Streets are special, they take a long time to get there, and then we can't make more of them, and so that it makes what's special about them very important to conserve. So let me just take you into the next slide. This is a photograph of Chatham's Main Street, King Street in 1912. Could be in a lot of places. I mean, one of the things that I find interesting is how each of these little buildings has been built by somebody to represent their business, and they're not only making a statement about their business, and they live upstairs, they're talking about their family, but they're making a place in a community. They're making a piece of city, and each of these buildings has its grace notes and its architectural detail. It wasn't just about selling whatever it was they're selling on the ground floor. There's a public idea here. And then the way they all work together, you get this kind of grand effect of the Main Street. And what's interesting in that is that this is all private investment, small pockets of money, and as it evolves, it continues to be a place for small private owners. But collectively, they have a rather grand effect. And the other thing that's interesting is you look at, I don't know how many of these, every time I go to a new town, I'm on the Main Street taking pictures. But when you look at the historic pictures, almost always the street, the public space is mud. The public sector was way behind the private sector in developing these places. So here we are. Some of these things come from Chatham because that was where I first started studying Main Streets, like 1978. Well, that's when I graduated. I'm really old. But what that drawing was what we did is we drew the Main Street plan, and we just wrote the names of all the businesses on each building. Well, look how many people are in there. Look how many people are living, working, running businesses in this very small space. It is like the forest, right? Like a whole lot of little things going on, and together they make something bigger and better and collective. But it supports diversity. The critical thing, the absolute, there's lovely buildings on Main Street, there's all kinds of great things, but the absolutely critical thing to preserve is that pattern of ownership to the tiny lot, the small building on a tiny lot. If you break that, you've lost it. I mean, you lost the ability for adaptation, for interesting new things to happen. These are the nice things that happen. These just happen to the merchants of Kensington Market where I live. But you know, when you've got that pattern of a whole bunch of little buildings and little spaces, some are rented, some are owned, some are whatever, you get interesting businesses evolving. In kind of big new builds, it's corporate retail. It is a kind of discussion about the kind of economy we want to have. the difference between our current economy, which is moving in and changing cities, and the traditional economy that built them. So here we have your basic block of a Main Street building. It's impossible to make more of this because the current building codes make you put 2 stairs up for 2 apartments upstairs, and they're just not economical to build anymore. So what we've got is what we've got until we can change the building code, and that's not an easy thing to do. There's also an environmental argument here, which is, I think, quite significant. That there's embodied energy in any building. Throwing buildings in the garbage is just unconscionable. Each of these little buildings is the equivalent of throwing out 3 million pop cans. I mean, Donovan Ripcom in the US, who is great on all these statistics, developed that one, and it's kind of nice because we're really good at paper and pop cans, but not like buildings. We throw buildings away. I mean, it's just like, what kind of thinking is that, right? And how is it that in our society we're so careful about some things, and yet we give virtually unfettered right to destroy when it comes to buildings? The only thing that's between destruction and is the Heritage Act, and I mean, it's not the best tool for this. I mean, we're trying to deal with a whole lot of very complex issues with the Heritage Act. So yeah. And World Watch says we're going to run out of building materials by 2030. I don't know if it's going to be that bad, but there is a waste question, there's an environmental question. So now we're looking at a preserved Main Street and what that looks like. This is Port Hope. We all love Port Hope, right? It's not so far from here. Port Hope wasn't always as pretty as it is. Luckily for Port Hope, A.K. Sculpthorpe lived there. She was a former ACO president. She was the only other person who served as president twice. Don't recommend it. Once is good. Twice is not so good. You really got to be dedicated. Anyway, but she just hounded everybody in Port Hope to save these buildings because she could see the value, and she made a nuisance of herself locally. And gradually, when it was time, the BIA decided that if they're going to renew the downtown, they're going to do it with heritage. And so for 10 years individually, people invested in the buildings and were terrified that somebody was going to buy the building next door and do something awful. And they argued with their council. It took them 10 years to get a heritage conservation district in place in Port Hope, but they got it. And now, the people say, I love being in a heritage district because it means I can invest in my building and this guy next door to me can't do something stupid. We don't, we go through the process, we agree how it's going to evolve, and then we move ahead together. So, yeah, great tool. Sometimes it can be kind of too cute, really. It gets too expensive, but that's a whole other discussion. Other kind of Main Street, your steady state Main Street. This is Hanover, Ontario. There's a few of these around, not many left, that are still serving their community the way they always did. This one's, still got angle parking on it, and every kind of business is represented. And it's, for some reason in Hanover, it's just, I don't know whether it's not the right size, not big enough, not small enough, but the chains haven't arrived there. There's not a big mall around there, so everybody shops in downtown, so it's just continued to be great. So, if you want to classify Main Streets and to talk about the steady state Main Street, the key thing you got to look for is, can you still buy groceries and wine on the street? If you can't, it's a steady state. Sometimes there's a cinema still there too. I talked a bit about ownership, but this idea of stability. This is Williams' shoe store. This is the second generation of this family running this place on Queen Street. Wiener's Hardware on Bloor Street, any number of places. But the fact that people can own the building and run their business, and they have stability in their family, it allows for all kinds of interesting counter economies to exist. For example, Williams was selling boots that were made by the last shoe factory in Ontario, this in London, Ontario. But just all of those, like all kinds of richness happens because of that. I haven't got time to talk about the cycles of Main Streets, but they go up and down. I mean, sometimes they're on the skids, and then then a bunch of young people with not much money but lots of energy move in, like my brother who bought this building on Queen Street, opened a bakery and a restaurant, and he was singing, and he just did it all, and he was young and had tons of energy, did it all on credit cards, and now the building's worth a fortune, right? So he's good. But this is the kind of stuff that, this is the kind of stuff that happens on Main Street. You know, and it all happens one at a time and all over the place, and as the buildings become available, somebody moves in. He bought it from a guy, it was a wreck, took him 10 years to renovate it. When he bought it, it was floor to ceiling full of newspapers and garbage, and floors were collapsing, and water was coming through the roof, and you know, and now it looks nice, right? It only takes 10 years. This one burned down, was replaced by the owners. This is Duke's Cycle on Queen West. That's I think the third generation in that location. So that, you know, it's all about evolution. It's the ability to evolve, the ability to do something crazy, the ability to own a place and run a business as long as you bloody well want to, and stay there, and nobody can evict you. And if you want to do something crazy, you can do something crazy because you own the building, right? So there's like lots of things can happen. And I don't know if we're going to be talking about small business, we can be talking about the arts, we can talk about all kinds of things that happen on Main Street, lots of stuff. So just in terms of how important owning is, here, like you're going to think these photographs were taken in Kensington Market. Well, you'd be wrong. These photographs are taken of people running businesses on little malls out on Lawrence Avenue in Toronto and in Scarborough. But if you look at those old malls, if you look at them in plan, you can buy each of these little buildings on them in the strip mall individually. So then you get this kind of stuff happening, right? Great. So, I just want to draw your attention to this study, which was done in the US on places with this character, this fine-grained, small, interesting business. And they compared like these fine-grained, interesting places in cities which we all love to go to, and that's where all the that's where all the great restaurants is, and all the things you want to do are always in these neighborhoods. We don't go out to wherever. So the creative economy thrives in older mixed-use neighborhoods. No surprise in that, right? But they wrote it down, and then so it's a fact now. But they also discovered that there were way more jobs per square foot in this kind of community. So if you want to talk an economic development argument, you should, if you don't have this report, you should got to get this report.
That's why I've written it down.
I'll send it to you. Okay, so that's, I could tell you more stuff about that, but I'm not gonna. Now I'm gonna talk about invasive species, Main Street killers. Social housing projects of the 90s. Great to put people on living downtown. Well, not going to work too well, because what happened was they didn't think about what happened at the street level. And so you get these lovely people, like lots of people living there. You walk along the Main Street and you look in the windows and you see somebody's office, maybe it's a meeting room. It's just disaster. So the whole rhythm of the street is busted. So the argument that in putting people living on Main Street is going to help your downtown, you really got to think very carefully about that. Stuff at this scale just plain doesn't work. ACO is in the process. Right now we've got like 3 or 4 of these kind of crazy developments going on Main Street around Ontario. We've got one in Georgetown, we've got one in Hamilton. Jeremy might want to talk about this. Is the Gore. Like facade sketch there. But Newmarket, there's another one going on in Meaford. These are real dogfights, and the planning system is not dealing very well with the notion of little properties and how important they are, and even recognizing how important that fabric is to the creative economy, whether it's small business, innovative, entrepreneurial, people, cultural, social, economic, and entrepreneurial. It needs little places to get started. This is where all this. I mean, it's like if you take the smallest fish out of the sea, everybody dies. So there. Here we go. So now I'm going to get into how heritage intersects with this discussion. This place is Bala Falls. There's a hydro plant threatened there. The community decided this is a very important place to them, and they got it designated. It was a portage, and you can see there's no building, there's no cultural marks, nothing there. But this place was valued by this community. It had been used for over 100 years. Had been the place where everybody took photographs of their kids swimming, people portaging with their canoes over their heads. wedding photographs. There were a million postcards with views out from here towards it in all different directions. So we put all this information in front of the Conservation Review Board, because the people who are developing the hydro plant were saying, there's no culture here, it's just an empty piece of land, right? And the Conservation Review Board said no. I mean, the Heritage Act doesn't deal with land use, but the Heritage Act talks about value by community and this idea that traditional historic activity can acquire cultural value. So this is where this idea intersects with your Main Street. It's not any of the individual buildings, it's how they work together and how that creates a bigger culture. That's what you can kind of start to capture in a heritage district. And you can start to write heritage district, so it's about that, yada, yada. Well, I'm getting there. Don't you worry about me. So, all right, now I'm going to talk to you about urban taxidermy. I touched on it a bit with those Main Streets projects. This is one on Yonge Street. Yonge Street is pretty much toast now. I mean, it's been facaded and this is one where the city really tried to come up with a compromise. So they kept the front 30 feet of the Main Streets building, but it's all owned by one guy. It's been divided instead of where there used to be 15 businesses, there's a bank and there's that, and the banks don't even like this space because they have to run their banks horizontally when they want to run the front to back. And then, there's housing in behind. So it's not working too well, and so it's like Mach 2 of facades, but it's not. It's as big a street killer as anything else. I believe that using a values-based approach to heritage conservation, it's possible to designate the full fabric of the property or properties in a heritage district in order to preserve the deep, listen carefully, I'm reading this really carefully, the deep cultural value inherent in the way of life that the fabric supports. This is this idea about how historic patterns of use can be part of the cultural value. Talking about meanings of culture. The intangible cultural value of independent, small-scale businesses that revive our economy, make walkable communities, are good for the environment, and are great places to just hang out, right? So that's the sort of stuff we should be talking about in our heritage district plans. Because then you can start to get at, like, we have to keep the whole building, the little buildings, and so on. So I'm going to give you an example of a place where they did this. They wrote this plan in 1990, so it's been stood up for almost 30 years. We've all been to the Byward Market, right? We all love it, right? Well, it's a heritage district. But it's a really, very smart heritage district, because what they did there is, because there's several dozen buildings in the Byward Market that are really important, and those are designated in our Part 4 and then identified as significant. Most of it is just ordinary little buildings that support interesting businesses. So this district plan is written that if you want to tear down a building, you can tear that building down. But you have to build the building you replace it with has to be exactly the same size as the one you took down. So it takes no incentive for demolition. It just takes it right away. And that, for 30 years, people have been moving in and changing businesses and occupying it, and it's been stable. They've lost a couple of things that they own, but mostly that has stood up. And it's just a great model for a heritage district that's been proven. You can say this was done 30 years ago. It's not some new clever idea. And it works. So that's the way to think about your downtown, is to connect, because there they connected the notion of small business and enterprise and buildings and then made it happen then. So yeah, you see, this is like, some of these are nice, some of them are not so nice, but it's, if you say you can demolish, people say you can't demolish, I'll never be able to take my building down. You can take your building down, you just can't make a bigger one. That's pretty good, and you can't join a bunch of them up together to make some stupid long thing that is full of banks and nothing happening on the street. So here's some thoughts on how to and I've got like one more slide after this, and then and if you want me to talk about 401 Richmond, I can do that too, but that's a PS. Speaking of Zybers. So things that you need to do to keep the Main Street. You can conserve existing small lots and buildings by controlling the building size. So maximum, not minimum lot size on Main Street is that's your goal. You can amend laws that automatically adjoin adjacent lots when owned by the same owner. Because if anybody tried to sever a property, it's really hard to break them apart. But if you buy two that are joined together, unless you go through crazy law things, they automatically join. It's written, all these laws were written when in the 50s when everybody thought bigger was better. Planning and heritage focus on retention and reinforcement of existing fabric, institutions, housing, and local business. We need to amend the building codes to permit so we can build Main Street's buildings again. And if you're gonna have a new building that's a condo on the main street with retail at grade, if you can't, that's the only thing, you're stuck with it, make sure that that retail can be sold off as individual condominiums, so you have at least the ability for your business or your entrepreneur to have some kind of stability in their ownership. So, you like this? I like this. This is an American model. To sum up, there are so many reasons to conserve our main streets and to think of them as we do old growth forests, as special places that have taken a long time to develop, that offer diversity, opportunity, resilience, stability, and that go through cycles of decline and then renewal. Conserving Main Street is a much more complex question than saving heritage structures or even saving important elements such as architectural detail or the work of a particular craftsman. We need to conserve this fabric because of the way of life it supports, a traditional, vibrant community where so many things can happen, because it is made up of so many small investors that come and go like plants in a forest, each making, just a second here, okay. Technical problems here. I'll be with you in just a second. Okay, I've got a few points to read here. Because Main Streets are resilient, because Main Streets are diverse in type and use, because they evolve one small property at a time, because Main Streets are places for innovation, experimentation, and stability. Main Streets are places of opportunity for a traditional economy of small investors, because Main Street supports public life. Never hear about that in shopping malls. Because on Main Street you can run a business in a property that you own and be master of your own destiny. The planning system needs to be to more fully appreciate the role these streets play, and not to look at them as simply places of retail or retail and residential. Hang on, I've got to move down, scroll down a bit more. Or where clear cutting would be beneficial. Conservation can happen through the heritage system, but our reasons for doing this are much bigger. If we lose these buildings, and with it all those little parcels of land, we can't make more. Thank you. And you've all been reading a million things about 401 Richmond in the paper, and I do have kind of work in this building. I know the family, but this is what happens if you get too much.
To hear a little bit about 401 Richmond.
Absolutely. Yeah, Joe, let me just tell you, I mean, bought cheap in the 90s and so it's classic, arts investment, bought cheap, rented out cheap. An owner who wants to rent to the arts community has built up a community and a cultural community, and very diverse, very interesting, curated group of people in the building. But all the development all around it have forced property values up so high that it may be the tax bill that kills off this place. So in thinking about intensification in Peterborough, you got to make sure that you're clear where it goes and where it doesn't go, because if it goes where it's going to push rents and property values through the roof, and we're living in a regime where taxes is determined by property values, and that property values is determined by zoning and planning regimes. You've got to be really careful in writing your plan to make sure you're not letting high-rise towers go in next to your arts community. It's just a formula for disaster. I mean, this has been so high profile that there may be a new tax class created for this kind of building. They're working at Queen's Park. The Premier's office has the Premier's assistant has got a file named 401 Richmond, and we might save this, and we might have some policy coming out of this, but it's something that you really have to look at very, very carefully in thinking about the role your downtown plays in the economy of Peterborough. So it's not just about saving old buildings or pretty buildings or ones by the important art. It's saving the vibrancy of, if you're talking about vibrancy, of your community. and saving the places where the things that are going to make whatever economy grows here, they'll have to start in the small places. So that's what I got to say about that.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Okay, and our last panelist is our own local Laurel Pollock. So Laurel is a multidisciplinary artist, activist, and arts administrator who lives and works in downtown Peterborough. She's currently the artistic director of Atelier Ludmilla, a production house and art lab dedicated to making, creating, and fostering public art and performance works. AL produces a variety of events, from full-scale theatrical productions for all ages and tiny pop-ups and one-to-one performances. Grounded in arts and theater, in and with community, Laurel Pollock produces arts events in parks, market squares, on the streets, and in all sorts of unusual spaces and places. Laurel studied at OCAD University in Toronto and has worked in the Union Studio and Fourth Line Theatre in Peterborough, as art director at Trent Radio, the general manager at Public Energy, and has produced Alley Waltz for Arts Week Peterborough on a number of occasions and served as the program director for Arts Week in 2015 and 2016. Laurel Pollock.
Hello. So, how many people here are artists? Please put up your hands. And how many people here are arts administrators? How many people here run a business in downtown Peterborough?
Non-profit business?
Business? Yeah.
Non-profit business?
Non-profit? How many people here work in the non-profit cultural sector? Ah, very nice. Okay. And how many people here have had some connection to what we call the Braund Building over here, the arts? How many people here have lived, worked, visited, had some feeling of, oh, this is a special place? Wow, that's pretty great. And who owns the building? Just put up your hand. Hi. Hi, it's nice to meet you. Hi. I know, landlord is a funny word. It makes us sound like you're feudal slaves. It's true. But here we are. I've been talking to a lot of the tenants of the Braund Building. And I've been a member of the building as a person who's been renting studios for many, many years.
It's the art building. It's not the Braund Building.
Well, it's also a low-income building too. There are people there who have been living there. Oh, what the building that we're in? This building right here, the meat locker? This is Apollo's Gallery, the Acme, the Evans Contemporary, sorry.
No, but explain where the Braund Building is.
The Braund Building is right out here. Does anyone not know what the Braund Building is?
For the podcasters.
Okay, oh, for the podcasters, great. So the Braund Building is a building that is on the southwest corner of Hunter and Water. And for many, many years, many people have rented studios, both live-in and work studios, for many years because Jim Braund, who the building is named after, affectionately or otherwise, has allowed people to rent there really cheaply, which is terrific. He's the first landlord I've ever sent a thank you note to. So it's an odd one. So a lot of people have been in and out of there, including Tim Merritt, who's our neighbor, and Joe Stable. I think the place has been affectionately known as the Art Stable because of Joe Stable. And if we further your deep ecology metaphor, he's like the big bullfrog in the swamp. You just bought a swamp, darling. And really incredibly important place that has, I know the word vibrancy, as you say, depends on many things, but boy, it's smoking hot in there right now. It's pretty great. And it's been a real dream to be able to work and produce works there, and thanks to Paulo for just lifting things up with your gallery. A gallery just allows us to imagine actually showing our works and bringing people in, and it's a very legitimizing thing that you've helped to do, Paulo. So that's great. But now it's a little precarious, you know, because we're not quite sure what's going to happen, and we'd love to be talking with you. So I've been talking to people and asking them what they would like to happen. So I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell y'all. Some people say it shouldn't change at all, and of course that's really impossible because, you know, the building is kind of falling apart in many ways. And we've been very good. I bought and put in my own windows. Joe, we've all been managing to maintain that place as best as we can. But of course, we don't want to lose our precious, affordable studio spaces that help to make literally the downtown of Peterborough pretty important, I think. Does anyone here think so too? So we're not sure, now we're learning these wonderful ways that we can maybe, if not, you're the landlord, so you own the building, if we can engage with you, sorry, I don't mean to embarrass you, but you know, you're kind of a shedazzle right now. So what ways that we can do this, I'm not sure how, maybe the EC3 can help us to find out how we can do this, find out what people want. There are some people who want it to be exclusively artist-run places, and I think Jim had that in mind, and had it in mind for some years. Jim also rented to a group in Peterborough called PCAP, the Peterborough Coalition Against Poverty, and gave them a very reasonable rate. And they did some excellent works there because of that, and that was great. Now, Jim, I'm not sure if he's a great benefactor or just a very cheap landlord who knows that artist studios aren't really expensive. They're pretty low maintenance, and artists tend to take care of things, and that's all true. So you have that on the offer, I'm sure. So yes, what else was I going to say? Oh, Joe Stable has been there for 42 years. 42 years. And I think we'd like him to stay there for another 42. Can we? Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, he's really the linchpin there. He's the great bullfrog. I have another studio right across the street in a place called the Gallery in the Attic that Liz Fennell began. And, it's the longest running darkroom in Canada, and still is, thanks to Liz Fennell. It's terrific. And we have a show there tomorrow. Oh my God, I'm itching for myself. Come on by tomorrow evening if you'd like, along with the gallery hop. But I'm sort of explaining to you, Paul, that there's really a lot of what they call synergy happening right now in this place. And I'm very curious, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you say a couple of words about how you feel about being in the position that you're in right now?
Just to clarify, I don't want to be at.
Oh!
So,
Okay.
could be tomorrow.
Okay.
My thoughts on exactly.
On us, the arts,
Well, I think it's amazing. When we actually do have the opportunity, I always want to sit down with everyone as a group and kind of see if most of these people have been here for a long time, get feedback on where everyone's vision is, and hopefully integrate that into what I think would hopefully be a great arts hub in our core. So.
wow. All right, let's give that a round. Well, thank you. That's fabulous. I really don't know what else to say now. Any questions? Sure. Well, commercial galleries? I don't know that we have many commercial galleries here. Evans is not a commercial gallery.
Laurel, can you repeat the question?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question that you're back?
Oh, that's
Sorry, I just wanted Laurel to talk a little bit about the mix of galleries, artist-run studios, and restaurants and bars, because that's a big part of what we mean when we talk about the cultural life of the downtown, and Laurel really lives it.
Oh, okay. The cultural life of the downtown. Whoa. Yes, we've got a lot of it. Art spaces, artists run. It's terrific. We've got Evans Contemporary, which as you said, sort of a benevolent, we run our gallery. It's not for profit. Our restaurants, we have, of course, the cafe district downtown, which has been newly identified, which is really great. Patios, really quite vibrant. Downtown art murals. I'm sort of giving you a laundry list. I'm not sure. I think everyone here knows very well about how active and engaged and vibrant it is, and the need for spaces to maintain that, and for artists to have spaces in which to create the works that we all appreciate and need to keep these things going. And that's so necessary. I know we're doing a new cultural plan now with this city, and we're not doing a new cultural plan? No?
Official plan.
Official plan.
Yeah, it's a more planning-oriented plan.
It's a lot of process. Okay, there's a lot of process in it.
This is the big Kahuta plan, like this is the plan.
Yeah, let's make sure it's answering the right questions.
Yeah, from which other plans will.
Okay, great. Okay, so we would like to be involved in that, I believe, as stakeholders.
So, and we have not been invited to sit on the advisory group, so that's one thing we need to work on.
Okay.
EC3, or anybody, as far as I know, from the arts committee.
How can we do that? Now I'm going to ask you questions here. How can we get
We'll
involved?
work on it.
Okay, good. 'Cause I'm sure everyone would love to know how. Okay. Did anyone have any questions? I'm sorry, it's just sort of stumbling along.
So I just wanted to thank you. And then I have two quick questions, and then I think we can open it up to the floor. And then I guess to tag on to Laurel's piece, you know, Paul's probably a little embarrassed holding over in the corner, but I will commend Paul. Paul is, you know, one of our top local developers. He's very engaged. Also a member on the DBIA. He's, you know, a key leader in the Venture North development, which is a major undertaking and going to be a great community asset in terms of economic development and business accelerator for our region. So if Paul does become the owner of the Braund Building, I would imagine there is nobody to be in better hands with than Paul. So.
Good.
I have two quick thoughts, I guess, really for Jeremy. And one is, you know, I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about the shift of culture to vibrancy. And ultimately that had some, I guess, political leanings to it in terms of getting the message across. And so I didn't really understand at the end of that, the success of that. And maybe you could talk to whether that resonated better and what kind of some of the outcomes of making that shift in psychology or speech, how that landed.
So I'm going to try and answer what I think you're asking. So there was this shift in old cultural plans to use culture, and the new ones shifted to vibrancy, and I honestly feel it was a scapegoat. I don't think it was a successful shift at all. I think it was a choice of a word that they felt was politically safer than using the word culture, and equally allowed municipalities to not track, analyze, gather metrics on cultural development like they do every other sector. So it was putting us in a soft place as opposed to a place that can be like every other sector measured in some way. From the world of consultants, it landed great. It was really well received by municipalities because it allowed them that same flexibility, which is why we came up to try and challenge that word and try and put quantifiable, measurable data to the word so that we can say 97% of Hamiltonians chose air quality as their top-rated cultural asset. At that same moment, the city was trying to close down one of its 3 air quality monitoring stations that only cost them $25,000 a year. So we're part of a group of people that said, it's an idiotic choice. If as divisive a city as we are, this is something that kids from 14 to old people that are 84 agree on, we can't throw that out. So we're using it in ways like that where I think sometimes culture goes to the table, whether it's municipality or the BIA or the Chamber of Commerce or whoever it is, public, to try and justify investment and whether that's monetary or time or whatever in culture. And we get into this debate of, and it happens at the council table more than anywhere, you pitch an idea and ask for support, and it's picked apart on how many jobs did it create, what's the income of the people in the sector. They want quantifiable, numeric ECDEV numbers, and you can get picked apart for not having those. Or you pitch the soft side of culture and say how it's changed people's lives, and how it's made children happier, or it's made people feel more comfortable in their community, or whatever, and you get picked apart for not having the numbers. So we tried to go somewhere up the middle and say we're going to add this technical set of data that tries to marry those things together. So we've now done it at Hamilton and in Sudbury, and it's being used in both communities as sort of background data to change their conversation with council and their community with something that's irrefutable, as opposed to something that's softer and tangible about culture or violence.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's a simple move, but it eliminates the argument or the discussion about what culture is, because nobody can argue what vibrancy is, right? And it's all encompassing. And I think it's kind of interesting, the linkage to what Catherine was talking about in terms of heritage, not necessarily, I think often in heritage preservation, the discussion gets muddy about the preserving of a building or the facade of a building, which doesn't really speak to what it truly is. And I think you've done a really interesting approach to heritage in terms of the micro blocks or the footprint of a building, in terms of the heritage of the original intent behind the structure versus the facade of the building. And so my question for you then, Catherine, is what does that mean for areas that have already been gentrified, where we have these huge monolithic structures that occupy entire city blocks? Is there a way, or
I'm not sure what you mean by gentrified.
yeah, well, I guess gentrified policy. What is this? What do you see as an opportunity for main streets that have had that small block expropriated for larger monolithic developments? Is there a future for those buildings to be rebuilt into a main street, or has that ship sailed?
There's not much you can do with that. I mean, my only suggestion is that I mean, the sort of ownership of a small space is a really critical thing to vibrancy, certainly going forward. And the creation of longer, like cheap space 20 or 30 years after, down the road when the mortgages are all paid off. So that, like the condominiumizing of the ground floor, not just having it as one kind of retail. And I think there's a bit of a shift in that direction happening, only because there's only so many Shoppers Drug Marts the world can absorb. You know, and so the developers are kind of looking for some other way of dealing with it, but they haven't quite figured out what that might be. But honestly, the thing to do is get, you know, like, when those areas, like, they're gone, the damage is done once the land is assembled into a bigger block like that. So finding ways to stick your finger in that process so it can't happen. And the only successful model I found was within Byron Market. And at the moment I'm working on a heritage district plan for Port Dalhousie. And that's one of our principles, is to try to keep the historic buildings whole. The right guidelines, and you can't bash the walls. You know, there's a whole lot of things to try to prevent, to preserve those small places. Who knows how well? I mean, that's a principle, but it's a long way from being adopted by council as an idea. And I think it takes a while for people to get their head around that as a notion. Even we can point to something that's been successful for 30 years.
Well, and it's something that could easily be implemented in the official plan. So I think.
Well, yeah, you'd think there'd be more of it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would.
But it's you know, it has something to do with the plans of train. You know, whenever I had a little bit of a conversation with Michael Enright on the radio, and it was broadcast about a month ago. And you know, I said a lot of the same things I said here tonight. But holy cow! The next Sunday, there I was on the radio again, being quoted again, and there was all of these letters from all across the country that they were reading, people who were saying, yeah, like, we gotta, you know, we gotta deal with this. It's an issue we're losing, that, like this, the stuff that makes cities interesting. And so, I mean, that was just so gratifying, but it also just shows you that we haven't quite figured out how to deal with this. But Peterborough is as good a place as any to start and make a plan that's gonna work. Oakville did some pretty smart things when they redid their official plan and the secondary plans. They directed all the heavy development, heavy numbers towards the GO station and away from the historic area. And so that seems to be doable, and it seems to be working in Oakville. So, but it's, you know, the temptation for developers is to go like, oh, this is pretty successful. I'm gonna build here and wreck the thing. I mean, it happens time and time again. The developers move in, like on Queen West, around the Gladstone Hotel. You know, this horrible stuff that happened. Big local fight. The artists fought it, unsuccessful. Stuff got happened. Gladstone. You know, it's all. So stopping that, we have the tools to stop it, but you have to be conscious enough to say, we have to be smart about this. Use all the tools we got.
What are the tools?
The Heritage Act is a big one. The Heritage Act is important. The other one that I think has got to come into play are environmental goals. And ACO is lobbying the Minister of the Environment about, like, you know, and it's, luckily right now it's Glenn Murray who gets the sort of cultural link, but he's Minister of the Environment right now. But just like, buildings aren't garbage. Like, we stop, like we aren't going to throw buildings in the garbage anymore. I mean, it's so obvious and so simple, and there's nothing to stop it. I mean, trying to stop all that with the Heritage Act, which is complicated to use, you know, it takes a long time to save a building with the Heritage Act. Saying you can't put it in the garbage, well, that's the end of the story. Or at least you have to have a really good reason to put it in the garbage. We could do that, but as a society, we have to ask for it. We have to push our politicians that way.
Okay, so now we're going to open the floor if there's any other questions.
You both mentioned designers. What do you think motivates progressive developers?
Did everybody hear that question?
You know what, I don't know anybody, I don't know what, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but God bless them. I mean, they just, you know, I think, I know Margie better than Rob, but I think she set out to make a community and saw an opportunity and went for it. She was raised in a family that valued the arts, and she wanted to make a place for it, and she saw that she could rent this building to artists and make a reasonable return on her money, and it's been a very solid investment for her. And it allows her to pursue a number of, she started before she has a background in architecture, she has a background in community development. And she's just a wonderful person.
I've yet to meet a developer that I think is benevolent in the right way, though. And I know Margie and have met her a number of times. I've talked to her about 4-1 Richmond, and I'm working on a project in Glen Williams right now where a motivated philanthropic person has bought a building that's been turned into an art center. It's been an art center for 25 years. And they're in a precarious position similar to 401 Richmond, not with the tax issue, but with a transition issue. The owner's late in life and wants to move on, but his benevolence has created a completely unsustainable financial model. And as much as what Margie's done is great, what the cliff that they jumped off with 401 Richmond is that the property tax had been slowly increasing forever. And Margie, being benevolent, for a long period of time, chose to absorb that out of her slim 6, maybe 7% ROI in that building, where most developers would be looking for good-looking double digits. She took on that hit herself. So instead of the property tax increase being incremental over the steep slope that Toronto was on, artists went from paying rent that was associated with this property tax to rent being associated with this property tax, instead of it being bite-sized change over time. So it was a cliff they jumped off, instead of incrementally dealing with financial change in their neighborhood over time. So
I gotta tell you, the change was not incremental. She had an increase of almost 60% in 1 year.
In this most recent leap, yeah, for sure. So it's there, and that's why we've always tried to play with for-profit developers. I'm fine with people making profit off of buildings, So long as we understand where that profit goes and how it works, and that where the model starts is the place where artists can afford it, and we've left projects for them falling out of that path. Like the building that we did on James Street was a group of developers that came to us and said, love what you guys have done, you're making good returns with your other buildings for other people, do it for us. Found a great building, started it with really great rents, they did an amazing job renovating the building. We walked away from it after 5 years because they were choosing to move at a completely unsustainable path where the rents in those spaces 8 years later are almost triple. And artists are, and half the building's now more consultants than it is artists. So it's that shift is happening. So I don't know that I've met a truly logical, benevolent building owner. I think it's better to tie yourselves to people that are sound business people because they're the ones that will set a path of sustainability for a physical asset. It's whether we can convince people like our hopeful new owner to take 7% profit instead of 16% profit. And how does your community, if that's what you want, if enshrining this use and enshrining affordability on those spaces for artists is of value to you, how do you as a community invest in that for-profit owner's loss of opportunity? Is a fair way to consider it. If you're not going to go the nonprofit ownership model, how do we incent people like our new owner through reduced property tax, reduced development charges, whatever it might well be, to build spaces that can still serve the community and meet the financial need that they need, because their job is running buildings and your job is making art or selling widgets or making coffee. Everyone's got to find their way to make their bit. How do we make it possible for both of those values to be preserved in a development project? It's tricky, so
The thing that is that we need to think about as you know, in terms of planning, is to make sure that we're not, you know, through intensification, the unintended consequences of pushing property values and taxes and things up artificially. I mean, for her to be taxed on something that might happen on her property rather than what's actually there is really unfair. And that's, you know, if the LB directs three developments in the neighborhood, which, you know, in a kind of arbitrary way that has been happening, that is not even the city saying that this is the right thing to do. It's an outside body, and the province, with, you know, with the best of intentions with regarding intensification and the use of resources, and this is like they're like pouring gasoline on a fire that it's just out of control in Toronto, totally out of control, and not slowing down.
Was to try and save farmland, which, you know, we
all
favor
agree
of,
of,
but we
but-
don't want to lose the
But
downtown.
the time frame that it's moving ahead with didn't allow municipalities to plan properly and to direct it into places, and nobody saw the tax thing coming. I mean, that was two separate pieces of legislation that weren't intersecting very well.
So back to the tool note that came up earlier, two of the things that two tools I'd love to see removed from the shopping list that the province has created is the vacant building tax rebate, which exists all across the province. There's some serious progress on that. OBIA, the Ontario BIA Association, has been lobbying against it really hard for a number of years. That basically incents people to do nothing with your downtown core, just wait for assets to grow. So that definitely needs to be killed. The other one that needs to be killed or seriously reworded is the impact legislation around highest and best use, which is what Bing Markey and a handful of other projects where they say, so an example of our downtown core on James Street, it's been small businesses for generations. Arts communities moved in and doing interesting things. An organization, the Hamilton Artist Inc., one of the oldest artist-run centers in the country, saved up every penny they could and wrote every grant they could, bought a building, renovated it right on the corner of James and Cannon, fantastic little space. It's now tricked out to be their home for the rest of their lives. It's great. But because up the street, our planning department approved a 22-story condo that now has gone, you know, 16 stories above the average building on the street, MPAC says the highest and best use for X amount of space on James Street is a 22-story condo. So the Hamilton Artist Inc. gets hit with a $50,000 or whatever it is tax increase in 1 year. An artist-run center, that's like fold up the tables and go home. That's the end of it. So the notion that highest and best use is focused on money best is a really interpretive, subjective word. How do we get that word best in their system to include, because it currently includes churches and things of that sort that are of cultural value to some people. So how do we get other things added into that column of best, that best doesn't have to be about money, it's about what's best for us. We write policy, it's for our province, the policy is for humans. We should be allowed to change it and interpret what best means. But right now, the highest and best use system is ruining community projects across the country. Like it's not.
Next question. I just wondered if the reworked OMB is going to be a tool that could be used.
Nobody knows what that's going to be yet. I mean, it's just too soon to say. It's an announcement. Nobody knows what that's going to be in any substance. It may just be a rename and the same old animal. We don't know. It's too soon to tell.
Is there any way that we could make some suggestions, arrange, to have teeth put into it that would help?
Well, there's been a long process going on, but it's the power of the influence of the development industry in Ontario. It's huge, and so I'm a little skeptical of anything that the development industry loves is going to be really curtailed to the degree that the public is asking. So we just, it's too soon to say. I mean, it would be lovely if it was restored more to its earlier purposes, but in the last few years, it's really been making a lot of decisions that have been not supported by the public. Let's just say that.
Yeah, just a question. If you could give us some hints, perhaps, how we could engage our city council. I was sat through, as a result of the adventure we had with the Peaks here and the Black Horse buildings, the city council was presented last Monday night of basically an overview of the Ontario Heritage Act, what it means and what we can do, things like this. The local committee tried to enact a heritage registry, which is fairly simple. It's kind of like a playlist of your favorite music, which met with absolute resistance from the city council. It did not get passed. So again, now it's open season for, and there's 1,700 buildings of interest in Peterborough. They tried to present a list of 45 of the most important, mostly downtown. It did not go through council because people did not understand. So we're up against, I mean, it's nice to talk about what we'd love to see. It's nice to talk about what developers can do and how they can engage. But we have a city council who basically doesn't have a clue. What do you do?
Well, I mean, the obvious is a lot of city council gets blamed for a lot of things, but they get elected. So there's a political process that you need to engage in there. But just let them hear, like you just call them up. I worked in a politician's office. You'd be amazed who doesn't phone. Phone. Just phone until they're so sick of hearing from you, they realize they made a mistake. But the other part of it, I want to talk about a really positive model that Guelph went through in about 10 years ago. Guelph was facing a similar situation where the council was making development decisions and planning decisions that where the arts community, the heritage community, environment, a number of people who had shared values really disagreed with what was going on and felt that they had to change the political system. So they formed, leaders from all of these communities formed what was called the Guelph Civic League. And they started just making public and recording the decisions that council was making and putting that up online. And then they started to look for candidates to run whose decisions were going to better reflect the values of the community. They ran, they got a slate in, and so things started to work much better in Guelph. The decisions were better, they're much more pro-heritage. I mean, that was 10 years ago, and I think for the last 5 years, because things were starting to work, the energy went out of the group because it just dissipated. It wasn't necessary anymore. But it's a very, very good model to start to make alliances in the community with the people who share your values. And you'll find them in all kinds of places. And just start, thinking about the next election. And in the meantime, just, let them know that you disagree with what they did.
We've also been really big fans of not assuming that there's a sort of probably a laundry list of people in your head that you assume are on the other side of the table to your issues, and not assuming that they're necessarily there. We had, like, when we did our first building at Sherman, we were the cover of the economic development guide to how great Hamilton is and whatever. We spent a lot of time putting on ties and going to business meetings with the chamber and spending the time to talk to them about who you are and what we do and why we're valued, so that when we stepped up at council the next time, we were showing up with 6 people behind me that are of institutions they respect, and whether that's the chamber or the university or a major employer or whoever it is that you can pull out of other silos into yours and say, we're collectively saying this. This isn't a bunch of wahoo artists saying, like, you gotta save our pretty, whatever. It's like you have to get, and it sounds demeaning to accept that that's the pile that you may be in. But I think if you can start to add weight next to your argument, I think it's a really valuable thing to do. And I think a lot of people will write that off as, I don't know, that it's devaluing, that you have to have other people to vindicate and validate your work. But if it gets to the end goal, I think that's the thing to focus on, is not necessarily worry about the crazy circuitous path you have to take to get there. Keep your eye on the prize and make friends with whomever we need to get to that prize.
Yeah, that's it. The study that Green Labs did, it was worth looking up and just start doing the same kind of analysis on Peterborough, who's employed, where the jobs are, and look at what's happening in a redevelopment. Is it giving you the same kind of return in terms of places to work and things happening? But it's work, and it's work and it's public education, but starting to understand, to build an understanding of how valuable this fabric is. It's not just about architecture. How valuable it is to the community and to the economy, and to Peterborough's image. And this is the stuff that this is what makes Peterborough Peterborough. The stuff around the edge could be anywhere.
I also do this talk about these I words, these 9 I words, and one of them is instigate. And pardon?
Yes.
Still can't hear the word.
Sorry, I've been trying to ask a question.
Oh yeah, give her. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Al. Everybody. Can you guys? I wonder if any of you guys can speak to a model of St. Catherine's. I think they had Braund University take a big investment in their downtown, which, to my limited knowledge of that, it created like a lot of students and people and kind of revive a kind of downtown that reflects our culture here, which is like the businesses, the mom and pop businesses you guys are speaking about, kind of moving to the suburbs and to the strip malls. And then secondly, like I think as an artist, we're kind of like sometimes not as organized as the developers, or like we don't have as much like liquid cash. So what I've noticed is that this is like a small town culture, and so I went to school with Jim's son, so I was able to find a studio through that relationship. But the same thing is happening with these big business deals, and so a lot of the time, if there is a big building that's going to come up, is there any way to create transparency within the community to because a lot of the times it feels like these big decisions are being made and we kind of find out a day late and $1 short,
Fair question. So I mean, the ability to create transparency in what the private sector is doing is almost impossible. And I think the way to do that is maybe touching on what I said earlier of finding the route now to insert yourself into as many of those processes as possible. And I absolutely hear where you're coming from. Like when we did our first building, I was 24, OSAP debt, no car, like I was a working artist. I had no capital to invest in a project either. But it was thankfully with a pile of information that motivated a building owner. There was no market for their building other than what I brought to the table. So it was luck, a lot of it, but it was also the willingness to meet them halfway on some things. So it's an extremely challenging place to be in.
I think like the situation in Peterborough has been like that, has been our story at some time. but the opportunity with like the real estate market, not only in Toronto, not only in Kensington Market in Hamilton, we're seeing the fallout of that as well here, so that these vacant places that normally would have offered opportunity to people like us are just getting snatched up because it's like a sure buck.
Right.
You know,
So like the last slide on my thing that I'll be happy to send out and share was a handful of purchasing and ownership models that are developing out of this sector. So you look at things like the Center for Social Innovation in Toronto that said, instead of only letting people that have $1 million buy a building, what if I had 1,000 people with $1,000 buy a building? So community bond process where people that have under, you know, like they had tiers of things, but literally people with $1,000 could invest in collectively buying a property. You've got things like urban land trusts coming together to buy community vacant property, but also to take deaccessioning city property and city land. So there's a process when a city deems a building or a piece of land surplus, who they first have to offer those properties to. And if you can get in and insert cultural institutions in that list, you've got a shot at getting something below market rate, which is a great place to be.
and so I'm sort of like uneducated and like I hear things like third hand, but we also have this history, I think, of like the deal from the Red Oak Inn, which kind of was like a backdoor deal, which sounds like what you're talking about. Like how does someone like me find out about the things you're talking about? Where do I look? Is it something that I have to like consistently bug someone in council about?
To find real estate deals or to?
Well, the opportunity that you mentioned, the surplus seems to be like, I can think of two examples like the Y and the Red Oak Inn that were like examples of that happening, but very quickly happening behind closed doors and ownership being changed.
You're right, and I was forced to learn it the same way you're probably in. I knew nothing about council minuting or any of that, but it's like there is a process, a legal process the city has to go through when they deaccession a property, when they have to post it. So there's definitely a section on your city's website somewhere where they have to list surplus assets in a timely manner, and they have to be listed for a period before they're allowed to be sold to anybody. You're right though, like as soon as the city's got a committee of staff somewhere thinking about whether that rec center is surplus, they're already talking to the university and the Y and whomever to figure out whether one of those is ready to step in, so when the report goes in, the next person's right in line. So it becomes this process where like, you'd be shocked how much of my spare time I spent sitting through council meetings, listening and figuring like, what is the language of this place? What is their process? Because it was absolutely foreign to me. So while there isn't a laundry list, like there isn't like a manual to like pick up, it's probably something someone should do. Like, where is this stuff? Where is it? What are these processes for our sector to become aware of and educated in and learn their lexicon and whatever?
Okay, well, thanks Jeremy, Catherine, and Laura. We're already at 9:15 and that was the amount of time, but we do have some more extra time if you guys are welcome to stay and mingle and ask some questions after the fact. So I think we started the ball rolling on a really huge, monstrous discussion, but I really hope that we all take that ball and keep it rolling, keep the discussion going. And with that, Sue has some closing.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the panelists for coming, to Laura. Thanks, Michael, very much for your insights and keeping it on, and to all of you for coming tonight. Obviously, this is an issue that's really important to EC3. We'll continue our work on this and continue our organizing on this. We're already built a partnership with Reimagine Peterborough, with Sustainability Peterborough. We're bringing the heritage folks all together with our Arts Leadership Caucus. I know there's interest, Kathy Matheson is interested in starting a Peterborough chapter of the Ontario
Architecture Conservancy Ontario.
ACO. That's Catherine over there with her finger up if you want to talk to her.
I welcome an opportunity to chat with anyone who has an interest. I think we're stronger when we work together, and thank you, Sue, for organizing this into EC3. Speaking to shared values with a collective voice is really empowering, and I think there is a definite need for public education and advocacy, particularly pertaining to some of the most immediate issues on our horizon. So if anybody's interested in thinking about the ACO and how that might be a fit, please come and find me before the end of the evening. Thanks.
If you go to the EC3 website, we've started a resource page there on this issue. So we have Annie Yeager's article there, we have an old report on a One Roof project, we have a link to your Facadism podcast. The podcast that Trent Radio and PIP are creating will be there. So I would say this is the first step in an ongoing process. You know, a lot of my work at EC3 is that hanging out with the people from Economic Development Council and things like that, and it's starting to pay off. I mean, we've only been doing it for a year, but it's starting to pay off, and we'll keep doing more of that. Peterborough's a really powerful community. We love this crazy city, and we're not going to let anybody take it away from us. So hang in there, stay tuned, keep at it. Thanks for coming.